saludarlos y por si hay alguna otra duda con el acuerdo, etcétera. Y así le paso la palabra a Brian. Brian, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Eva. Hello, everyone. Good morning from the United States and good afternoon to all of you. This session would normally be conducted by my good colleague, Marcia Ferreira. She happens to be out on medical leave right now, and I've been asked to conduct this session for all of you. I'm happy to be here. Eva, thank you for the introduction, and welcome everyone to the session. Eva touched on what we'll be talking about today. I'd like to point out that at any time, please feel free to use the chat or unmute your microphone to ask any questions or for clarification on any of the processes or any of the information that I'm covering. For this presentation, I'd like to begin just by talking briefly about IEEE as an organization. We are the world's largest technical membership organization with more than 420,000 members over 160 countries. We publish in the top cited science and technology research in the field, most notably our journals, conferences, and standards. We have about 200 journals, transactions, and magazines. We sponsor more than 2,000 conferences worldwide. We are a leading developer with over 5,100 industry standards over a broad range of technologies. And we also offer things like e-learning courses, technical books in all fields, and we are a not-for-profit organization with our mission of advancing technology for humanity. For today's session, we'll talk about our publishing choices. And in that publishing choices at the beginning of our, or near the beginning of our session, we'll be talking about your open access agreement and the process for submitting articles to take advantage of the APCs, or the article processing charges, and the agreement that we have between IEEE and your institutions. We'll also talk about the peer review process, the structure of a scholarly paper, submission guidelines, promoting your research, and then resources that are available from IEEE to support you in this publishing process. So publishing choices, a lot of the questions that we get are, where should I even submit my article? Am I ready for a full-blown journal article? Or is my research more at the stage that it would be accepted at a conference proceeding? And so just a couple of differences about the journal article versus a conference paper. So a journal article is really that fully developed presentation of your work and its final findings. This is going to be original research where you're going to present the results. You have clear conclusions that are made and supported by data. So this is essentially the process that you've gone through. You have already come to reached your conclusions, and the end of at least this research phase has been completed. You may have discovered, or you will have discovered, that you have more questions along the way. But in terms of this particular paper, it is ready for submission. A conference paper, on the other hand, can be written while the research is ongoing. And this gives you the opportunity to present your preliminary results. You can highlight some of your recent work and research. And these conference presentations are typically shorter in nature than journal articles, and they have fewer references as well. So depending on where you are with your research, a journal article or a conference submission may be more appropriate for you. For a conference, it gives you the opportunity to connect with your colleagues, to find people who are also interested in doing some of that research, and the opportunity to get feedback on what you're about to publish as well. Today's session, we're really focused more on the journal submission process. And so we'll be talking from that lens and determining how do we go about submitting to a journal versus a conference. We have over 200 publications from IEEE transactions, magazines, and journals. And some of the things that you want to consider while you're looking for a publication where you will submit your research is to think about who reads that research, who reads that particular publication. What kind of research is being published in that particular journal? And in reading that particular journal, you'll get a sense of what kind of articles that they want. With the 2000 leading edge conference proceedings, you'll also find that we have a wide variety of places, venues, where you can submit your research as well. You want to take equal care in determining which conference you want to submit your paper to. And a couple of other caveats with considering a conference proposal is that you want to make sure that you are able to attend the conference. So it's one of the criteria that's associated with having a conference proceeding. You also have to consider things like, are you able to travel to the conference location? Are you able to have room and board while you're at the conference? All those things that are surrounded with conference attendance. We do like to support our researchers in the evolution of their research as well. So this might be a typical way that one formulates their research paper is by maybe conducting a workshop or going to a conference where they receive feedback on their research, and the culmination is a journal article, which they'll submit later on. If you do go this path, if you're not ready to submit a journal article at present, we want to let you know that you may reference your prior publication, but you want to indicate what's different. So a presentation itself is not really considered a prior publication, but publication in a conference proceeding would count as a prior publication. And this becomes important later on when you're thinking about copyright implications. So in this sense, you would want to consider that your research should shift substantially going from a workshop to a conference to a journal article, in the sense that your research will evolve and your journal article product will be essentially about 60% different than what it was than when it began. So there are a few strategies to help you choose where you want to publish your article. First, you can use the IEEE Publication Recommender, which analyzes your article and provides a customized list of recommended publications. You can do this by running a keyword search in IEEE Explorer, or you can look at your publications that you cited in your references for ideas of what journals are relevant for you. But the IEEE Publication Recommender is available on the IEEE website, and I'll make sure that I send the recording of this presentation along with the PowerPoint slides to our contact, and we can distribute these slides and the recording as well later on. But that publication recommender available from the IEEE website will allow you to submit some of your paper if you'd like. You could submit the abstract, you could submit keywords. This will make a recommendation on either the journal that you would want to submit to or the conference that you might be interested in as well. You can also ask your supervisor or other colleagues who have experience in the publishing field and see where they recommend that you would submit your article. That keyword search and explore, we have a facet on the left-hand side where you can see what some of the more popular publications are related to your search term. And you can also do things like sign up for content alerts to be notified anytime a new issue of that journal is published. And you want to make sure that you're keeping up by reading some of the leading journals in your field as well. So once you have narrowed down your choices to a few different publications, make sure that you are reading those as they come out every month, and you'll become familiar with the writing style. You'll also become familiar with what are some of the things that they publish. At the bottom, you'll see we have a tip, and that's to read the aims and scope of your target publication. The aims and scope is essentially the overall summary of what is published in that particular journal, transaction, or magazine. So making sure that you're submitting to the right publication is important before you even begin to submit something. Another factor is that when you're selecting a particular journal, impact factor is one criteria that you would want to consider. So this is the journal's reputation in the community, or I should say impact factor is the metric that determines how impactful or how important is this particular publication in your field, and it's assigned a score. You can also consider things like the journal's reputation in the community, which is also important. So it may be a little bit smaller of a publication, but it's read widely by people in your field. So you can also look for new or lesser known journals as well. You can also evaluate a journal based on the editorial board and look at their qualifications and CVs. Each of the journals that we have through the IEEE collection will have information related to the editor, and you can look at what that person has published and get a sense of if your article, if your research aligns with that particular publication's interest. There are other ways of evaluating a journal. You can look at the number of downloads. So IEEE uses this information for revenue distribution. You can also look at patent citations. So you can see what some of the publications receive, some of the most patent citations. And you can look at other metrics like article influence score and eigenfactor to make your determination on where you might want to publish. I do want to talk a bit about open access. And I'm going to mute a couple of people just a bit to make sure that they're not, their conversations aren't heard. Open access is another consideration that you'll want to think about as you're looking to publish your article as well. So a little bit about open access in general. Open access is when an article is made freely available upon publication. So there's no subscription or pay-per-view fee required there. And this is often supported by an article processing charge, an APC, which is paid for by the author or by the research funder. Now, you'll want to look later on to see what the agreement is between your academic institution and IEEE. And we'll take a look at how you can determine that a little bit later on. You do have an agreement which does allow for a certain number of fully paid APCs out there. So these will be paid by, or the fee would be waived by your institution. And if you're looking for a fully open or gold publication, then that's going to be 20% off of that particular publication's APC charge for you. Some things to consider is that with open access, there may be a different copyright or license agreement than a traditional publication. So keep in mind those traditional publications, normally you sign over the rights to your article to the publisher, and we still do have that option with IEEE. But in the sense of open access, you retain the copyright, but you're making it available to be published on that particular journal, and it's going to be open for other researchers without that paywall or subscription. Something to consider is you may receive other journals that are interested or asking you to publish in their journal. And once in a while, you'll see things that are considered predatory journals. So predatory journals might be exploitive in the publishing model. They also have APCs, or that publication fees to authors, but they don't provide the same amount of support that other more reputable journals will provide authors. So there may be no peer review. So your article might be excellent, but it would be lumped in with other articles that have lower quality. There might be poor production quality. So the publication itself may not appear very good on a website, and just the production quality might be overall bad. And they can be difficult to find. So the point of you publishing your research out there, with open access, it makes it much more widely available. Our IEEE publications are indexed in numerous places. There are several million people around the world who are using IEEE Explore to look at research. So the chances of your publication, your research being discovered by other researchers is much higher than some of these other predatory publishers out there. Some of the things to look for on the right-hand side are: be wary of an unprofessional website. If you are receiving emails that are urgent in nature, that are really pushing you to submit your article to them, that can be an indication that they are just looking for content and using those fees without really representing your work in the highest quality. It could be an unusual scope. So in that sense, the journal may be very broad in nature and accepting things that are really disparate in terms of their research topics, and you don't see an overall theme to the journal. And an absence from popular indices as well. So your research, if one is looking on something like Web of Science or another citation index, your research would not be discoverable on that particular website. IEEE does have an evolving open access program. So we have around 160 hybrid journals. That means that we have the hybrid journals, you have the option to publish either as a traditional journal article or an open access article. So those hybrid 160 journals will give you the choice of what type of publication you want. We also have 20 plus, I think we're at 29 right now, fully open access topical journals. And we have our popular multidisciplinary open access journal, IEEE Access, which is our largest open access journal. It has over 60,000 articles published in it since 2013. It is a very highly cited journal in the range of many popular technical fields, and partly due to it being an open access journal. And it offers a rapid yet rigorous peer review process of 4 to 6 weeks. That's one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later on, is what is the length of that time from when you submit your article to when you receive the acceptance. And IEEE Access has one of the shorter review periods, providing you a confirmation that your article has been accepted earlier than some of the other publications. Let me just go back. Just at the bottom there, we have just crested over 100,000 open access articles via IEEE Explore. So that means if you were to go to the IEEE Explore website without logging into your institution, those articles would be fully available to all researchers out there. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment and just see this next section. We're really going to be talking about what is the specific process for you to submit an article to an open access journal, what happens during post-acceptance, and then when would you need to sign into the Rights Link for Scientific Communications website to complete that process as well. So I will pause just for a moment to see if there are any questions out there. Okay, I don't see anybody using the chat or unmuting your microphone, but please let me know if you have any questions out there. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. So the author process for submission. So this is after the first step would be choosing your publication. So you're going to want to find the most suitable publication out there for you. There's a question out there, can it be in every journal? So you would want to submit to one journal at a time. For open access, IEEE does have, the majority of our publications do have an open access option out there. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and determine how are things available for you to submit something with open access. So this is going back to our publication recommender. This is, again, going to make a recommendation based on the keywords you put in. If you put in an abstract, it's basically going to have a suggestion for you where you might want to publish which journal might be more suitable for you. Within that publication recommender, you can look at things like the impact factor, the eigenfactor, the article influence score, basically to determine what the journal's reputation is. You can also look at the aims and scope, and I would say that that's one of the most important things you should consider looking at is the aims and the scope, which is going to describe what types of research is published in that particular journal. You'll also look at open access availability. This is going to describe to you if it's a fully open access journal or if it's a hybrid journal that I mentioned earlier. And those hybrid journals offer you the opportunity to either submit your journal as a traditional publication. That means it's going to be behind that paywall, available only to people who subscribe to that IEEE Explorer and the full content, as opposed to open access, which would be open for everybody. It also describes information like how many issues come out per year and submission to publication in Explorer. That just means, is there an opportunity for you to submit directly from the website? Another option for you to choose a journal, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, you can actually use IEEE Explorer to determine which publication might be suitable for you. So you can get a full list of our journals that are open access only or hybrid journals by going to the Explorer website, choosing the Browse Journals and Magazines option from the top navigation, filtering by IEEE, so the IEEE is the publisher, and then looking at the radio buttons, open access titles only, or titles with some open access, and that'll give you the list of what the open access titles are available. Once you choose a title, a journal that you're interested in, IEEE makes it very easy for you to submit your manuscript. There's actually a submission button right from the Explorer platform where you can submit your article. This is an example of a 100% open access journal, which means that all the content is freely available without charge to users or institutions. So the first example that we have is really talking about what does it look like to submit in a fully open access journal, and then we'll talk about what it looks like to submit to a hybrid open access journal. For the submission process, the corresponding author, that means, if you have a group of authors, there is one author that you will designate as the corresponding author, and that person will receive the information from the journal of whether of the next steps that you need to complete in order to follow through with your submission. Authors submitting to fully open access journals will be asked to accept the open access charges during step 1. If you're submitting to a hybrid journal, that open access option will not appear until after your article has been accepted. So we'll take a look at the examples of what that looks like in terms of the workflow. So again, this is after you've selected a particular journal where you've decided you want to submit your article. This is the fully open access journal process. You would begin to type in all the or copy and paste all the information that you have coming from your article. So it would be the type of article, the title, the abstract, all the information included in our website. So that website is on the left-hand side. Each journal, sometimes the journals will use a slightly different interface. It's going to ask for the same information, but the colors and information might be a little bit different. And I do want to go back to the chat and just point out, Syed, if I misunderstood your question there, please feel free to ask it again, and I'll try to make sure that I respond to you as you need. With a fully open access journal, you'll be offered that OA agreement right in the terms of agreement. So at that point, you are stating that you understand that you are submitting to a fully open access journal, that you have read the terms, and you are submitting and you're accepting the article processing charge. For a fully open access article, also called or journal, also called a gold journal, your institutions generally are covering 20% of that cost right now, as opposed to the hybrid journals, which there are a limited number of APCs from your institution where the APC charge will be waived completely. To determine what your institutional partnership is, there will be a hyperlink that is institutional partner list, and you can check that list and determine what the OA agreement is with your particular institution. The question going back in the chat is this specifically for IEEE? Comparing it to Sage Open as well. So we have different, or excuse me, we're very similar in terms of what we offer in terms of OA journals through different publishers as well. So, you know, this presentation is more geared toward looking at things from the IEEE perspective, but you can use some of these same concepts to submit your article to any place that you choose, actually. Determining what Sage's agreement is with your universities, that I'm not sure. So I don't know if you have a similar agreement with Sage as you do with IEEE. I would imagine that if you go out to the Sage site or contact one of your administrators, they'd be able to determine what your open access agreement is with Sage versus what you have available through IEEE. And again, if I'm not interpreting your question correctly, please let me know. So this is the process for a hybrid journal. So with a fully open access journal, you would accept that you are submitting to an OA journal. Oh, no problem. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. That's exactly what this presentation is for. So thank you. So with the hybrid journal, you'll be typing in the same information, so it looks very similar to what you're going to do with an open access journal, or excuse me, with a fully open access journal. With the hybrid journal, you have the option to select what type of publication you want after acceptance. So consider, you know, most of IEEE's publications out there, 160 publications, have the choice for you to make. Will you publish it traditionally, which means it's behind that paywall, or would you prefer to publish it open access? And you won't receive that choice until after your article has been accepted to the publication. So with a hybrid journal, you'll go through the similar process to uploading your manuscript and your files. You'll make sure that you have all of the keywords that you're going to want to use, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, making sure that you select the correct keywords. Basically everything to do with what you would want to submit for your article now, you'll submit during this phase of the process. You'll also include the metadata as well. So this will be a list of all the corresponding authors and their affiliations. Your institution, so you want to make sure that you're using your university ID, institution ID, or university ID. And that will then identify you as having, as part of that institution and having that agreement with IEEE through your institution. You'll notice that term Ringgold is integrated in the submission system, that phrase in the right-hand side. That Ringgold is essentially like a unique identifier for your institution. So your institution has a unique ID within that OA process, and your email address is going to link you as an affiliate and then identify that you have that agreement available with IEEE through your institution. Step 5, if you do have any funding information, so if you've received funding for your research at some point, you would want to identify that within the process as well. And then step 6 would be making sure that you review the information, and you will submit it as well. So for articles, again, you'll have that opportunity to select open access later on, and that RLSC, that rights link for scientific communication, is part of that process where the administrators are going to see the requests that come through and then confirm or deny those requests. Yep. I do see a question about a cover letter. There doesn't need to be any sort of cover letter. It would just be more part of this particular process. I may have said cover letter. I didn't mean to. So once your article has been accepted, you as the author will be prompted to upload the final files, and then you'll choose a copyright license. So for the hybrid journal, you will then make the selection of publishing open access or traditional. So post-acceptance, so once you have been accepted to the journal, your publication has been accepted, this is where you will submit your final files. So this will be the final version of your article that is available. And again, Sad, if I misinterpreted your question about the cover letter, let me know. But you don't need to submit a cover letter through any part of this process. All the website will walk you through all of the submission requirements in terms of what you need to submit along with your article. Oh, let me go back to the steps really quickly. Okay, I don't, step 5, oh, thank you. Oh, cover letter. Oh, okay. This would be, sorry, thank you for that. This would be in terms of writing anything that's related to the funding process as well. So if you did receive funding from another organization, a grant or something like that, you would want to explain a little bit about what that funding is intended for, to make sure that, yep, this is to make sure that it's appropriate for this as well. So you're just explaining why you received that grant funding. Thank you. Okay. Again, once you've been accepted to a hybrid publication, this is when you'll have the choice for making the decision if you're going to publish open access or if you're going to publish traditional. And again, it's the same interface or similar interface to what you would see at the beginning, where you'll have that choice of of choosing open access or choosing traditional. The little check boxes or radio buttons next to each choice means you do select to publish open access. And again, you can see what the institutional partner list is. So you'll be able to determine more of what your institution's agreement is with IEEE. Or you can choose traditional if you want, but choosing open access gives you a greater range in terms of how many people are going to see your publications. With the post acceptance, so you will be able to select a copyright license. So you'll determine what sort of copyright license you would like for your article. The most common with open access is the CC-BY, whereas you, the author, will retain the copyright to the article once the article is published open access. There is another option out there which is a bit more restrictive. That means the article can't be reused for any commercial purposes, nor may that article be changed in any way. And then the traditional license, where it's behind that paywall or behind a subscription, is when the copyright is transferred to the publisher and the article is published behind that paywall. So that's sort of the traditional model versus the OA. Authors publishing in those gold or fully open access journals can choose between the two, CC-BY or CC-BY and CND. And you would want to check just to make sure that your institution doesn't have any sort of license restrictions out there. Just a good idea to double check on that. So once you have the article details, make sure that those are all correct. This is just the process of going through and accepting that you are submitting something that is original, that is your original work, that you are agreeing to either pay the APC fee or it's being waived for you. And you'll select your copyright agreement as well. And then you want to download the agreement and just keep that for your records. If you have submitted to a hybrid journal, you may receive an article, or an email just reminding you that your institution does have this agreement with IEEE. So if you've chosen to submit as a traditional publication, and your institution does have an open access agreement, this is us sending you an email saying, hey, we noticed that you submitted as traditional. Would you like to change that to a hybrid option? And here are the terms of your agreement. And you can, again, in case you chose traditional at the beginning, you can change that to open access at that point. This is the rights link for scientific communications process. I do cover this briefly just to show you as the author what will happen once you submit your article to an open access journal. So that APCs, your institutions are using the system, RLSC, to be able to confirm or deny requests that are coming through. So after acceptance, the authors will receive an email prompting them to pay all charges through the rights link for scientific communications. Again, if your subscribing institution has that agreement with IEEE, and they do have that agreement with IEEE, this is where your subscribing institution will, apply the funding that's appropriate for your article out there. Once the article has been accepted, that request has been accepted, you'll receive a confirmation email coming from IEEE on behalf of your institution, telling you what the terms of the agreement are. If you have selected a fully gold option. There may be part of an APC that you need to pay for. If it's part of the hybrid collection, then most likely you wouldn't have to pay anything at that point, but you'll receive an email just giving you more information about what the costs associated are, if there are any. This is from your administrator side. So when they see your request coming or your article coming through as part of that APC agreement or OA agreement, they have the opportunity to approve or deny your request. If there are any costs that are associated with submitting your article, this is through the rights link through Scientific Communications portal is where you would pay any of those remaining fees, if there are any associated. And again, many of your institutions have that agreement with hybrid journals that will waive that APC completely for you. But this system is where, if there are any charges, you would pay for those charges at that point. And this is just going through you paying for those fees, and then your confirmation that the fees have been placed. We do have a dedicated open access site available from the IEEE.org site. So it's IEEE Open. There you can look at the institutional partners that are available. So actually, if you're going to go under for authors, you would see what the agreement is for your institution. And again, I'll make sure that this presentation is sent out to all the attendees. Through this website, you also have the ability to look at the title list. So we talked about seeing what OA publications are available from the IEEE Explore interface. We also have keep the title list here, so you could do a quick view of what publications are available for fully OA or hybrid. And these are some of the websites that are associated with that. We'll go through the IEEE Author Center a little bit later on. So the rest of this presentation is geared more toward the writing of a scholarly article. So we'll go through the peer review process, talk a little bit about the paper structure. I do want to pause just to see if there are any questions out there about that open access submission process, either through a fully OA journal or hybrid journal. If any questions do come up, again, please feel free to comment at any time. You can unmute your microphone if you'd like as well. Oh, there is a question. Is there any discount for a peer reviewer? So if somebody is reviewing that particular publication, I'm going to say generally no. There's no, not really an incentive in that respect to becoming a peer reviewer. There are other incentives to becoming part of the peer review process, but no, if you are performing that service to a particular publication in that you are a peer reviewer, no, there's not. I'll say no, at least through IEEE. Maybe other publishers have something, but we don't. So good question. Okay, so just a little bit about peer review itself. So that peer review plays a couple of different roles in the publishing process. And so this is really talking about, after your article has been submitted, what is the process that happens behind the scenes? And so at this point, your article has been submitted either to an OA journal, a traditional journal, or hybrid journal. And the peer review process is going to take place. And I'll mention that this is really looking at things through the journal submission process and not a conference submission process. That conference submission process might be similar, but really focusing on what it means in terms of submitting a journal article. And so that peer review process acts as a filter to ensure that research is properly vetted before publication. And it also improves the quality by providing constructive feedback and suggestions to you as well. So again, I talked about predatory journals out there that don't provide the same level of peer review during that process. And that means, potentially more articles that are inappropriate or the research hasn't been fully vetted would slip through and thereby, undermining the quality of that particular journal. And this is one of the things where, more reputable publishers out there, IEEE, for example, would have a robust peer review process. And to your point, Syed, the people who are acting as peer reviewers for these publications generally have, years of experience in their field. They're very passionate about what research is being published in that particular publication. So they're volunteers in the sense that they're not getting paid and they're not getting any sort of there's no real financial incentive for them to do it. But there's the sense that they're providing something back to their research community. And there's also the idea that, they're able to see some of the research as it's first coming out too. So it kind of gives people an insider look as to what people are publishing. Yeah. So the peer review process. So the editor-in-chief gets the paper. And so what happens is your article, once you select the publication, your article then goes to that particular editor. And the editor-in-chief is going to just do a quick plagiarism check and also look at our, IEEE prohibited authors list. And basically, after that initial check, then send it to an associate editor, most likely at that point. And the associate editor will assign it to at least 2 reviewers. It's generally more like 4 or 5 reviewers. And we expect, the majority of those reviewers to come back with a recommendation as to whether they think it's appropriate for that article to be published in that journal. The reviewers send back their comments to the editor, and that editor then communicates with you as the author with one of the following decisions. It's that your paper is either going to be accepted, there may be a recommendation to revise and resubmit, or there may be a recommendation to reject that publication outright. But the editor-in-chief makes the final decision and it will inform the corresponding author. So you'll receive an email that basically has one of those 3 options associated. So what are some of the things that editors are looking for? So the scope. So does the article's topic fit in with the publication? So, do your due diligence up at the beginning when you're looking for a publication to determine that you are in the scope. So often that's one of the biggest issues, is that people will choose a publication that really they should be choosing a different publication. Validity. So are the reported methods and the rationale valid and accompanied by appropriate and supporting data and references? And are the data and results interpreted appropriately? Is the study well designed? Novelty. Is the article original material and distinct from previous publications? So this means that, are you doing something that has been, different enough from previous publications out there? And it's your role in the literature review section to make sure that you are describing how your article, your research is original and distinct. Importance. So is this a significant finding to an important problem? So are the results new and significant? Are your results contributing to your field? And is that literature review adequate and up to date to make sure that you are indeed, finding a gap in the research out there and that you are coming in with something that is important in your field? Clarity. Are the ideas expressed clear and concisely? So are the results able to stand on their own without being too overly preliminary or speculative? And And then interest, will this be interesting for will the publication's readers be interested in reading this article? So when they are flipping through, that the physical magazine or looking through the publication's table of contents, would this get people's attention and something that they would want to read? And finally, are all the submission requirements met? So in terms of, the process that we just went through earlier, have you determined the appropriate journal for your publication? Have you submitted all the charts and graphs and everything associated with your paper? So basically, have you gone through those steps correctly? And that's a big part of this process too, is just making sure that you are meeting all those submission requirements. So sometimes reviewers will reject content if the content is not a good fit for a publication. If there are scientific flaws out there, it's an inconclusive results or incorrect interpretation of the results, it's fraudulent, it's poorly written, or it doesn't address a big enough problem for advanced scientific field. So many of the reviewers are really looking for weaknesses in a paper that may result in a rejection. So it's up to you to make sure that you are not providing an opportunity for your paper to be rejected at some point. And once you've received that decision, so let's say that you were an author and you've just received a revision decision after your submitted article. So now what do you do? So the first thing is to make sure that you read that decision in full. You want to make sure that you are looking at the editor's comments and the reviewer's comments and suggestions. You want to look at the instructions on how to submit a revision. And you want to make sure that you are looking at the submission revision deadline as well. So once you've had time to look at that decision email, at that point, you're going to determine if you want to resubmit your article or not. And that, revision, it's not necessarily required. You could choose to submit to a different journal instead, but you want to think about how confident you are that that revision will be accepted to this particular publication, as opposed to if you don't revise it and submit it somewhere else, is that a good idea? Often the peer review pool is small for these publications, and you may have someone who reviews publications or two different publications. So if you do submit your article to a different publication without revision, again, it may be rejected for those same reasons. If the reason your paper was rejected was because it's just out of the aims and scopes of that particular journal, the editor-in-chief will generally make a recommendation on a different journal for you to submit to. If that's the case, if that's the only note on why it's been rejected, then feel free to resubmit without any revision. But if there are some recommendations on how you might want to update your paper, it's a good thing to take a look at those and then follow through with those revisions as well. Another consideration is you would want to discuss the revision with your co-authors. So do they agree with those, the revision decision, and do you want to go ahead and move ahead with the revision? And again, can you meet the revision deadline? So we'll assume for the purpose of this presentation that you do want to go ahead with the revision. So at this point, you want to obtain any additional materials that you need, any new data, any additional analysis, etc. You want to manage your file versions out there. And I will mention that as IEEE, I should say, Explore subscribers, you do have access to Overleaf Pro, which is an authoring software allowing you to collaborate on publications with a group of people. So if you weren't aware of that, some people aren't aware that you have access to Overleaf Pro. That is something that you want to take a look at and sign up for the Pro version, which is free through IEEE. All you need to do is become or sign up with a personal account on the IEEE Explore website. That is free to do. You will just create an account, and from there you'll be able to access Overleaf Pro. And so that, a software like Overleaf Pro will allow you to manage the different versions of your paper out there so that you and your co-authors will have be able to manage those different versions and then submit the final version. You'll also want to begin a response to the reviewers. So in determining what the reviewers' recommendations are, you want to address each of those recommendations. Again, make sure that you're stating the changes that you've made with your particular publication, your revision. And so that way the reviewers will have, make it difficult for them to reject your article. And just some tips for responding to the reviewers' comments. So keep an open mind out there. So the reviewers, you have been associated with this topic for a long time in your research. And so the reviewers are coming in it with fresh eyes, and they may see things that you and your group haven't noticed before in the research process. So this is an opportunity for you to see things from their perspective. And again, it's your job as the author to explain your research and the conclusions fully. If the reviewer did not understand what you were trying to say, that just means that you may need to improve how you're communicating those points. So your data and all the information might be good. It just might need a revision in terms of the language that you're using. It's in general, try to comply with the reviewer's suggestions when possible. However, it's not always an absolute requirement to implement all the suggestions. If you do choose to not implement a suggestion, you want to indicate why you did not choose to make that change in the document. And again, it's always good to be courteous when you're replying back to an editor as well. And finally, always be alert for ethical issues such as citation, coercion. Contact the journal's editor-in-chief immediately if there are any ethical concerns out there, which that's probably pretty rare, but a consideration to make. So how does one become a peer reviewer? So there are a couple of things that you can consider. If it's a journal that you read frequently, you can visit the journal's online submission website, and there's generally an editor-in-chief that is associated with that publication. And so you can reach out to that editor-in-chief right away. They're also through IEEE Explore and probably other journals out there as well, or publishers. There is an opportunity for you to put your name in as a potential reviewer as well. So then somebody will evaluate your credentials and basically determine if you have the correct research experience that people are looking for to be able to evaluate other people's research in that field. And again, it's going to be kind of a similar process of looking for where you want to publish your article. Again, you're going to use a database like Explore to determine based on your keywords what some of the more prominent publications are based on that topic. And that's going to lead you to where you might want to become a peer reviewer at. We'll talk briefly about the paper structure. So just the structure in general of what a scholarly paper looks like. So before you begin writing, you'll want to consider, drafting an outline, the why, what, and how of your particular research. And you'll want to consider organizing your data by importance and not necessarily chronological. So there is generally a page limit for the submissions that are out there. So you want to make sure that you are putting in the most pertinent criteria first. not necessarily the newest or oldest or anything like that, but you're going to evaluate the resources that you're using to determine which ones are the most important for you to put in. You'll want to choose, again, a journal or a conference. And so this is up to you where you think your research is in terms of that process. Are your research results fully developed and ready to be shared with everybody, or is the research sort of ongoing? And are you ready for a conference presentation at that point? Generally, for the journals, there is a template that you will follow from that journal so that you can plug in the information and submit it based on the journal's criteria. And then you want to tell a story. So make sure that you have a theme and a punchline, and you want to avoid the data dumping. So merely, putting out all the data that you've collected in there without really explaining or having a narrative behind why it's important and why you've done the research. Some of the elements for a manuscript are the title, the author, abstract, introduction, approach, results, discussion, conclusion, acknowledgements, and references. You're probably all very familiar with these aspects of a scholarly article, having read many of them yourself, but we do make some recommendations on what are effective practices for each of these particular sections. And I'll go through this rather quickly. So the title should be specific, concise, and descriptive. It should grab the reader's attention. And it really should be, answering the reader's question of, is this article relevant for me? So often the title is really going to be the thing that people will first see for your research. So as they're doing a literature search in a particular database or an index, this is going to be the first thing that really catches their attention. I'm not saying it needs to be glib or humorous or anything like that, but it should really convey the content of your paper using the fewest words possible. So here's two examples. One is, a good title, and one is maybe a confusing title. So in this example, you have the first option, which is a human expert-based approach to electrical peak demand management, which is clear, concise, as opposed to the second title, which comes across as a little bit confusing, right? It's hard to tell exactly what the author is trying to say based on this title. It also uses some subjective terms like better approach. The abstract, so the abstract should summarize your research, your results, and your conclusions in about 250 words or less. So you may find it easier at this point to start with a longer abstract and edit it down to the 250 word mark rather than trying to aim for 250 words from the beginning. That abstract should also be, pretty much self-contained without any references, equations, or abbreviations included in it. Some tips as you are writing your abstract. So you may want to ask yourself what the purpose is of your research and why should your readers care about it. So think about why you found your research topic interesting and why did you decide that this topic, and try to entice the readers into being interested in it as well. So again, along with the title, the abstract is going to be the second thing that people read to get a sense of your article and if it's something that they want to continue reading. You'll also want to discuss your approach. So you should clearly mention the methodology used in the abstract. You want to discuss your findings. So you want to at least provide information on the answer to your research question, on whether the hypothesis has been supported or not. Don't use vague language and provide actual results in your abstract as well. Again, this will be further enticement for people to read the full article. And then provide a fair analysis of your research, in your opinion. So you don't have to exaggerate the importance of your research, but provide, an idea to the reader of how important it is in your field. And really your abstract sort of acts as that advertisement for your paper. So you want to make sure that you provide enough details to make the reader want to read more. So some abstracts, do's or don'ts here. So this is an example of a good abstract versus an example of a not so good abstract. And again, I'm not going to read this entire thing. You'll have these slides to read through if you'd like. But basically the example here is that the second version of the abstract isn't really providing any actual results. And it's just sort of describing the organization of the paper. So we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and then this. So that first example really goes through some of the features that we talked about in the previous slide, which was, again, providing enough information that you're enticing the reader to want to read the entire thing. You'll also want to think about how people are finding your paper as well. So you'll want to have a good understanding of what some of the appropriate keywords, key terms are, and sprinkle those through the title and the abstract. So you want to use some of those same terms that you would use to conduct research or search on your topic as well. And you want to include both broad and narrow terminology. So you can get a sense of this by going through the different research results and seeing what some of the publication topics are associated with your paper. You can also use a thesaurus to determine what are some of the appropriate key terms. But again, this is going to determine how your results appear in a list of, or how your paper appears in a list of results out there. You'll then move to the introduction. So the introduction will really be a description of the problem that you researched, and it should follow, the following steps, right? Move from generally known information about the topic to prior studies with historical context to your hypothesis and an overview, and then get into how the article is organized. So you're going to want to, at this point, get the reader to care about the topic and bring the reader up to speed on why the topic is important. And you'll also explain that knowledge gap. So you want to make it clear of what is known and what is unknown and get the reader curious about what's missing. It should be fairly specific, not too broad, not too big, about 2 pages and written in the present tense. So with that goal for the introduction, the goal is what question are you trying to answer? So as you explain your work, what your work is trying to achieve, be sure to provide a perspective consistent with the nature of the journal. It's tempting to sort of reuse an introduction from a similar research study, but each paper should present something new, and thus you have a unique motivation to it. So the introduction section includes a review, again, of the existing literature to position your research in the field and to show the novelty of your research as well. You can reference previous papers in the literature review, but try not to show any bias towards any particular author or paper. You're just sort of stating some facts at this point. Your methodology section. So in the methodology, you want to give a straightforward description of what you did in your research and how you did it. Code and computations and algorithm simulations and analytical methods should be described at this point. And you need to provide enough detail that someone could take your methodology section and reproduce your research. So again, you want to avoid copying from previous publications. Even if you follow that same methodology, you want to rephrase that description of the methodology and make it substantially different from previous publications. And if you do cite something that's been done in a previous publication, you don't need to describe that thing in great detail again. You can always reference back to that previous publication. And then your results and discussion. So in the results and discussion section, you want to summarize your data and present it without bias. Make sure to highlight your main findings, feature any unexpected findings, and include figures, tables, graphs as appropriate to help illustrate your research. So that visual communication with a good figure or table can be a very effective way to illustrate your point. So tables are best used with exact values, and figures can show data trends or other visual information. And illustrations and figures should have enough information that they can be understood by themselves. And in the discussion, you can interpret the results and explain what the results mean. Make sure that the discussion corresponds to and complements the results, but don't simply repeat the results. And your conclusion. So the conclusion should bring your paper together. It should summarize plainly the study and the key findings. It should put your findings into context by reviewing some of the other major studies on the same topic. You want to explain the limitations of your research and how you try to mitigate them. You want to outline any implications and recommendations moving forward as well. So to help differentiate between the abstract and the conclusion, you want to think about the reader. So the person reading the abstract typically has not read your paper yet, and is that the abstract is really helping them to determine if the paper is relevant to them. Whereas the person reading the conclusion has already read your paper and wants to provide you to provide your concluding thoughts and answer. So what's the importance of it? And so it's be sure to be clear and provide a justification on how your work advances the field in this conclusion section. And just some general tips here. Make sure that you're communicating clearly and concisely. Organize your materials logically. If English is your second language, consider that English language editing service. And often universities will have a writing center on campus who can help with this process as well. Use an active voice, use simple words, and make sure to define all abbreviations. And a good practice is to prepare an elevator pitch. So that idea that you would have a limited amount of time to describe your research to somebody. So make sure that you can answer the key questions of why it's important. Have a quick note about the methodology, and you can pull information from your abstract and your conclusion to help you with this. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second to see if there are any questions. We're going to go into submission guidelines. And with those submission guidelines, you're just going to want to make sure that you basically have a checklist for submitting your article for peer review. So as you're getting ready to, the elevator pitch can really be a good exercise to help you determine the importance of your research as well. And it's always good in case you meet somebody at a conference, you have a quick way of summarizing your research for them. So it's a good process to engage in. It helps you reflect on your research in a slightly different way. So with the checklist, here are some things to think about. So while you're preparing to submit your article for peer review, make sure that you review the submission guidelines for your target publication and that your article is meeting all those requirements. So a lot of times people are tripped up just by doing the mechanics of submitting an article to a particular publication. So make sure that you are following all the guidelines that are associated with that publication. You want to agree on who will serve as the article's corresponding author if your article has multiple authors. It doesn't necessarily have to be the primary author, but you're going to designate someone who's going to be the person who is receiving all that feedback and the notifications from different publications as well. You want to make sure that you have all the necessary files available. And you want to make sure that you have that open researcher and contributor ID, that ORCID ID, if you don't already have one. We'll talk about that in a slide, in the next couple slides. For multiple authors, make sure that again you agree on having a corresponding author before you submit. You want to make sure that all the appropriate co-authors are listed, and you want to make sure that you obtain from those co-authors their consent to be listed on the article and their approval of the final version that's been accepted for publication. And it's also the corresponding author's responsibility to keep all the co-authors apprised of the article's status, including furnishing all the co-authors with copies of the reviewer's comments and a copy of the published version of the article as appropriate. That ORCID ID is essentially kind of like that Ringgold ID that I talked about earlier, whereas the Ringgold ID is assigned to an institution. This 16-digit unique identifier is assigned to you as a researcher. So you would go to the ORCID website and sign up to receive your unique author identifier. IEEE and many other publishers require that ORCID ID to help tie you to your own publication record, right? So this is going to be a place where where you can go in and submit all of your publications so that they can be found in one area, so that everything you've published can be attributed to you. Some of the information that's associated with the ORCID ID is just, it's going to collect all of your professional activities in one place. Think of it as like LinkedIn, but for scholarly publishing. This can also be important for people who have common names out there, like James Smith, or a very common name, where it's hard to distinguish that person from another person with the same name. So it helps to keep that person's publishing history all associated with that person. This is a free, registration is free, so you don't have to pay for anything to receive that ORCID ID. You can put it in the signature of your email if you want. You've probably seen that quite a bit from your professors and other researchers. But again, it's a way for you to sort of start promoting yourself in the research community, and people can visit that ORCID website and view more about your publication history and you as a researcher. For submission guidelines, you want to submit to only one publication at a time. And this is really something that's associated with scholarly and scientific publishing ethics. You want to avoid submitting an article which is the same or very similar to previous work as well. And so that's where we go back to the beginning of the presentation. We're talking about that your research should have evolved from a conference proceeding, right? So there should be kind of rule of thumb is 60% difference. So even though you're continuing with your research from your conference proceeding and evolving that into a journal article, you want to make sure that the research has evolved enough to where there's been a substantial change. So again, here's a little caveat. IEEE recognizes that technical research is often first published as a conference article with preliminary findings. And as those initial findings become fully developed, the conference article can evolve into a journal article, provided that both the earlier and later articles undergo standard peer review process. The later article contains substantially more technical information from the earlier, and that the later article cites the earlier article and indicates how the two articles differ. So that can be the method you employ to make sure that you are submitting something that's unique and has evolved. To submit to Explore, so this is sort of the similar process that we talked about earlier, in that you will find the particular publication that you're interested in. There will be an option to submit your manuscript, and you can do this directly from IEEE Explore if you'd like. And at that point, you'll be prompted to set up an account with that particular journal so that you can go through that journal's submission process. For conferences, it's a little bit different. You'll want to go directly to the conference website, and you'll look more for the conference call for papers. And there you'll find information about the submission and review dates, acceptable formats for submission, any presentation requirements. You know, are you required to go to the conference? Is it a hybrid conference? Can you submit something as a recorded presentation instead? All those details are going to be listed on the conference website. A little bit about the IEEE article posting policy. So there are different stages where your article will be posted. The pre-submitted version of the article, the submitted version of the article, accepted version, and then the final version. And IEEE has a different posting policy for each stage of that article lifestyle, or life cycle, excuse me. So the pre-submitted version is the version of the article before it is submitted to IEEE for peer review. So this is what you and your authors have come up with. You haven't submitted it to a publication yet. At this point, you can submit it to Tech Archive or your institution's website, and this does not count as a prior publication. I mentioned that prior publication because there are copyright implications that are associated with it. So the pre-submitted version, before you submit it to any publication, it's still yours in terms of copyright, and you can do you can submit it to these places. Once you submit the article for peer review, you can still have the article up on your personal website or your employer's website, and you can use it in your own classroom. You can have it up on an institution or a funder website, or any compliant scholarly collaboration network. You should include on the first page that the work has been submitted to IEEE or whatever publisher for possible publication, and that copyright might be transferred without notice, after which the version may no longer be accessible. So think about that in terms of, you know, publishing in an open access publication and your rights as an author versus publishing in a traditional publication, which you're sort of transferring the rights of your article to the publisher. For the accepted version of the article, so you can still put the version up on your personal website or your employer's website. It can still be made available on Tech Archive or archive.org, or as on the funder repository, whatever the funder repository or funder requirements are. For you as the author, you want to make sure that you include the IEEE copyright notice. When the article is published in IEEE Explore Digital Library, you want to update the posted article to include a full citation to the published version with a DOI, and remove the post article from any third-party servers. And then the final version of the article may not be posted online. You can share copies for individual use. You can use the article in your own classroom, and you can use the article in a dissertation. But third-party use requires permission from IEEE. And really this depends on what the copyright agreement is that you signed. Okay, are there any questions about the submission process for different publications? And remember, each of those, it's going to be slightly different based on the publication. Oh, I did see, sorry, I saw some questions come in. I'll go ahead and read those out. So in the case of a conference article involves into a journal article, do you recommend to maintain the same title unaltered or to modify the title for a journal article? So this person's concern is that maybe having the same name can make some researchers tend to cite the conference instead of the journal article, which would be more detailed and complete. That's a great answer. When the conference proceeding evolves into a journal article, I would recommend changing that title so that it makes it, more unique and people aren't confusing the two versions? So that's a great question. But yeah, again, just like your research has evolved, I think at that point you can also rename your research article as well. And then another question, do you have any IEEE statistics about what is the optimal number of pages for a journal article to be more attractive and more cited? You know, I think I do have a slide on that coming up. If I can put a pin in that question for right now, there's actually a research article published on IEEE that talks about what makes a highly cited article. And it goes into things like the number of authors, the number of pages. There will generally be a limit to the number of pages that are associated with the journal article. You can pay for an overage charge where you can submit a longer article out there. But that's a good question. So if you don't mind, I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit because I believe I've got a slide coming up that addresses that specifically. So thank you. And I'll try to keep an eye on the chat out there for questions that are coming in. So we'll go through quickly and just talk about some ways to promote your research out there. So again, eliminating name ambiguity. So if people have a common name out there, it can help to associate that ORCID ID number with your name so that you can make sure that all your publications are associated to you. Again, registering for that ORCID is free, and you can go to that website and do that if you haven't done so. And again, it's required for all IEEE publications. But you want to be consistent and use the same personal name format as well. So if you used a middle initial, or you've spelled, if you have some variation of how you spell your name, make sure that you're consistent throughout your publications. Maximize discoverability. You want to think in terms of how people are searching for your topic out there, your research. So how would people who are looking for similar things go about searching a website or Google Scholar or some platform to find information? And you want to put yourself in those shoes and think about search engine optimization to make sure that people are able to find your paper, so that your paper kind of comes up first. You can create multiple points of access as well. So you could deposit your work in different repositories, those different archives that I talked about, and also publish it open access, because then people who are just doing a search on Google Scholar and maybe end up on the Explore platform would be able to access your article without having any sort of paywall. And then you want to promote your research as well. So you want to share it on social media, share it through your own research network or on listservs. And again, create that profile on Google Scholar, ORCID, mention it on LinkedIn, all sorts of things. This is just an example of being consistent with your name affiliation. So this is a person who has published under different variations of his name. And also looking at the affiliation. So making sure that affiliation is up to date. And now IEEE Explorer will allow people to put in multiple affiliations as well. So if you, did your research at one institution, but you moved to a different organization, you can list out those multiple organizations. Thinking about the keywords, this goes back to that, the search engine optimization. Make sure that you're putting in, you have already just been through the process of doing that literature review and coming and finding information based on the key terms that you're putting in. So think about how people are going through that process and how they'll discover your information as well, your research as well. And so you want to think about how those keywords show up in your title, in your abstract, all sorts of things that are going to contribute to whether or not people are finding your particular paper. Again, you want to publish open access if possible. I already kind of covered this slide earlier, but we do have many open access options available, either as hybrid or fully open access titles. And we have our large IEEE open access multidisciplinary title. This is one example of the preprint server that is available. So Tech Archive is an open moderator repository for unpublished and pre-peer review research in electrical engineering, computer science, and related technology. So this allows you to sort of get your first version of your research out there for people to discover. And again, it's really meant to provide more accessibility for scientific findings, improve research, and you're able to put that first version out there. Just keep in mind that these, the papers that if you do go to Tech Archive to look at other people's research, these publications have not been through the peer review process yet and may or may not have been published on through a journal. IEEE also has a few different opportunities to provide information that's going to supplement your research as well. So if you do have large data sets that are associated with your research and you're collecting those, IEEE Dataport is our web-based cloud services platform to store some of that data. It allows up to 2 terabytes of data. It allows linking to IEEE Explore articles. The data sets have their own digital object identifier, DOI, and they can also be put in, you can store different versions of your data sets as well. So you have some sort of version control out there. CodeOcean is similar in that it's a repository, but specifically for code that you're working on. And again, both Dataport and CodeOcean are available for you to go out and search as independent platforms out there. So you can look at the code that people are working on. You can look at the data sets that people have collected. But again, this allows you to share your code with other authors out there. So again, this is also going to be identified by an icon in the Explore library, linking someone out to the CodeOcean platform where they can then have access to the code that's associated that they've been working on. And they can run that code and work on that code in a capsule on CodeOcean. This is an example of the ORCID ID. So again, in terms of promoting your research out there, this is what it looks like when you have signed up for that ORCID ID. You can provide your employment history, your education qualifications, and then all the works that you have published. You can also set up a Google Scholar profile as well. And so this will allow you to, yet again, really sort of develop yourself as a researcher and help to basically help people connect with you as a researcher as well to make your work more discoverable. And you can share it on social media. So this is an example from the IEEE Explore platform where you can email this. We need to update our Twitter to X now, but you can share it through that platform, Facebook, or LinkedIn. But there's an easy option for you to share your work as it's been published. And IEEE does have a social media toolkit for authors as well. So after you have published your article and you're ready to really publicize it out there, there are plenty of support options and tips coming from IEEE, including the ones that we just covered out there as well. In terms of making your article more discoverable, and I think that this goes back to the person's point who asked the question of what helps for an article to become highly cited. This is one of the things that we found on the Explore platform is the ability to publish with a graphical abstract or video abstract. So thinking in terms of just providing that text abstract that's out there, you can also augment your research by including different ways of discussing your research by including either the visual abstract, which could be um, an image sort of describing what your research is or one of the main images from your paper, but also a graphical abstract as well. And so more and more of our publications on the IEEE Explore platform will allow you some flexibility in terms of that abstract. So you'll still submit the text abstract, the narrative, but you can also submit a slightly different version in text form, or excuse me, in video or graphic format. This is just one example of what the video abstract might look like. So again, I think that this goes into the person's question about, what makes it more approachable and visible. You want to communicate clearly, concisely. You want to organize your materials logically. Again, we kind of covered all of these things in a previous slide, so I won't go over them all again. But again, scholarly articles that are hard to read don't necessarily make the author sound smarter. And it shows that, and research shows that those articles tend to get cited less. So it's about people being able to understand your research and for it to be approachable. And this is the article that this slide is referring to an article that you can actually find on the Explore platform, where the authors went through and looked at the characteristics of a highly cited article. And so to the person's question out there of, is there a number of pages that it's associated? It's not really about the page length per se, but there are some other key factors here that can contribute to whether or not people read and then cite your article. Things like the number of words in the title, the number of authors. This is making a recommendation of 6 authors. You can plus or minus that by however many you'd like. But by having let's say more than one author, what you're doing is you're using those other authors' social networks and professional networks to also disseminate your information. Because if you think, it's not just you sharing your article out there, it's the other authors who are sharing their article out there as well. There is a character limit. So that might be, associated with the page limit out there, but there's a minimum number of characters that's associated with it, a number of figures, a number of tables, and then looking at equations, which don't count toward a publication. Use them if they are needed and when they're needed. But I hope that this answers your questions in terms of what makes an article a little bit more highly cited in terms of the page number. And again, each publication will have a maximum amount of pages that are out there. So consider that when you're publishing. Just wrapping up with some of our resources that are available. So I did mention that we have an IEEE Author Center. The website is at the bottom of the screen. And again, I'll make sure that I distribute these slides to everybody who attended this presentation today or everybody who registered. So the website will be included below. But the Author Center has a lot of great features out there, including a new author checklist. We'll go through some of that. I think that there are some of the options that are associated with it. It's got that publication recommender that I mentioned earlier in terms of when you're looking for a place to publish your article, what might be one of the public recommended publications for you to choose. The author website also has an article template. So this does provide you a template where you can plug in the information from your publication into the platform. And then you can submit that article that's been already configured with this predetermined template out there, which will save you time. We also have a reference preparation assistant. So after you have your paper sort of ready to be reviewed, you can submit it to the reference preparation assistant. Someone will check the references to make sure that they are cited according to IEEE style. And then you have other support options from IEEE as well, including the IEEE Authors Newsletter. So this is a free e-newsletter, comes out 6 times a year. You're not subscribing to anything else when you sign up for this newsletter, but it really provides you some information about what are some helpful hints to publishing in IEEE publications. And I think that you can take those and really think about how they would help you if you're submitting to other publishers as well. We have something called Collaboratech, which is another sort of social network for IEEE researchers. In that Collaboratech social network, there's something called Author Lab, and this is where people will post questions to their peers. And we also have people who are monitoring this from IEEE. So if you have questions about, publication questions associated with something that you're about to submit, you can post those to the Author Lab. You can also read the questions that people have submitted. It's really one of the more popular popular networks that's available on Collaboratech in terms of what sort of questions do new authors have, and what sort of advice do authors who have published frequently have for people who are about to submit as well. And then you have access to the Explore Digital Library. And so this is probably what you're most familiar with in terms of IEEE. If you're using it for literature searching at your university, you have access to 6 million full text documents. You have our journals, conference proceedings, and standards. You have all these different publications that we've been talking about this today in terms of where you might submit your article and where you might do research to support your the literature review process, and also how you can use the Explore platform to determine what are some of the better keywords and where might you ultimately submit your article for publication. And there are all sorts of things you can do on the Explore platform to help you with that literature review process, including doing things like signing up for a free personal account, which will allow you to, number one, have access to that Overleaf Pro account that we talked about, but then also do things like be able to set up a table of contents alert or a search alert so that you can be notified when new issues of a journal come out, or be notified when new research comes out based on your search query. So if you type in a very complex search query, you can set that as a search alert, and you can have up to 15 search alerts going on at the same time, where you can be notified when new research is being published in your field. This is just an example of how you would go about setting up that search alert. So once you do your search for a particular search terms, so this is radio frequency microsystems, you can then set a search alert based on that topic. You can also use some of the facets to refine your search. So again, we talked about some of the how do you find key terms that are associated with your topic by looking at the left-hand facets of publication topics. You can see how people are describing or what some of the subject headings are for your particular overall topic, and then what some of the subheadings are as well. And you can sprinkle those in your abstract, your title, and your paper to increase the visibility as you're being published. You can also use this the Explore platform to find influential and popular papers. So the default is by relevance, which is great, but you can change that to the most recent first, to the most cited by papers, most popular, or most cited by patents, which can be helpful. And you can also download citations from the search results page. And you can export that information into plain text, bibtext, an RIS file, or a citation management system like RefWorks. So not only can you collect those citations, but you can also do a little bit of text mining through one of those platforms as well. Through the Explore platform and that personalization feature, we do have something called My Research Projects, which are essentially research folders that you create on the Explore platform to help you keep track of your research. So if you're going through and you see papers that you want to start collecting in a particular folder, you can do that by creating the folders on the platform and then going through and assigning each document to a particular folder or group of folders. And then you have access to, of course, the PDF version of an article on Explore, but you also have access to the HTML version of the article as well, which offers a lot more ability to interact with the article than the typical PDF version. So in this case, you have, through the HTML version, the ability to look at the authors, the figures, which have higher resolution figures, the reference list and citation list to follow any references, citations, keywords, and the metrics. Once you identify some key authors in your field, it can be a good way to understand some of who are the prominent researchers out there. So you can use the Explore platform to go into their profile. And normally this page doesn't have it, but the ORCID ID, that ORC ID, will be available here as well. And you can link out and see their complete publishing profile and history. I mentioned those references and citations. So this is through the HTML version. You can get a sense of who the authors have cited, but also the papers who have cited this particular article as well. And then your keywords and identify the search terms through the publication topics heading. So again, this can be a good indication of what are some of the key terms that you want to include on your paper and other ways that you can express your research topic. There are higher quality or higher resolution images available through the HTML version. So you can browse and download any of those figures and graphs. And then you have access to the actual code through the HTML version of the paper as well, where you can download that download the algorithm or equation as either a mathml or dec command. Okay, again, when I send this presentation out, you'll have access to all of these websites that I mentioned so far, including the IEEE Author Center, which has all those helpful links as you are publishing your paper, but after it's been published as well. Of course, the IEEE Explore Digital Library, which is the platform you use to find information supporting your research, some more Explore information, and then our journal citation reports, which give a ranking for our journals as well. If you have any questions about specific aspects to the publishing process, including copyright policies, posting articles in repositories, reprints, anything to do with copyrights, or you're just not quite sure where to start, we do have an email out there, authors@ieee.org, which can help answer some of those questions. So that concludes the presentation for today. I want to thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for your attention at this time. I'm going to remain online to answer any follow-up questions that you might have, but I, again, appreciate your time and thank you. Great, thank you. Glad to read it was helpful. And again, I'll follow up to make sure that this presentation is sent out to everybody and that you have the slides that are associated with it as well.